I'm Cynthia Rowland, and this is episode 106 of EO Radio Show. As we finish off 2025, we're presenting our 17th in the series of quick tip episodes, focusing on the details of state registration of nonprofit corporations. In previous episodes, we talked about filing in Delaware and California, which are the most frequently used by our clients, most of whom have a connection with California. Other episodes have focused on the state filings in Nevada and Arizona, Washington State and Oregon, Alaska and Hawaii, New York and New Jersey, Massachusetts and Connecticut, Maine, Vermont, Rhode Island and New Hampshire, Florida and Louisiana, North Carolina, South Carolina, Kentucky, Tennessee, Oklahoma and Texas, New Mexico and Utah, Colorado and Wyoming, and Washington, D.C. And last month, we started on our Midwest states, Michigan and Ohio. With the help of Joe Hilliard, today we look at the basic filing requirements for nonprofit corporations operating in Illinois and Indiana. You can find all the prior episodes on our website or at the Farella YouTube channel, where there's a playlist just for state filing requirements. We'll work our way through the rest of the states in future episodes. Welcome to the EO Radio Show, your nonprofit legal resource. Brought to you by the Exempt Organizations Group at Farella, Braun & Martel. My name is Cynthia Rowland, and I'm a partner at Farella. I'm a business and tax lawyer with more than 30 years of experience advising clients on nonprofit and charity law. Through this podcast, our lawyers and guests will discuss a range of legal and business issues impacting the nonprofit world because we understand you work hard every day to make your community a better place to live and do business. Many of our programs focus on the basics, and at times we'll do a deep dive into narrow and complicated legal issues. Again, welcome to the EO Radio Show. We're glad you're here. So here we are with our quick tip for nonprofit corporate filings in Illinois and Indiana. I'm joined by Joe Hilliard today, and Joe will lead us through the Illinois and Indiana filing requirements for nonprofit corporations. Joe is a senior paralegal at Farella. He specializes in formation and compliance matters for all manner of entities, and in particular, with me, charities that are tax exempt under Internal Revenue Code Section 501c3. Prior to working at Farella, Joe worked in-house for several real estate development and management companies in Southern California, working on real estate purchases and vendor contracting. Welcome back to the show, Joe.
It's good to be here.
So I gather that we don't have any updates for the states that we've already covered this month, and so we can dive right into Illinois.
Yep, that's correct. As we get through these, we'll see where they've updated this year, the two new states we're talking about today, so we can talk again about how things get updated during the year. So it'll be perfect. In Illinois, they use their Secretary of State that governs their formations. And then for a domestic not-for-profit corporation, they have a form Articles of Incorporation, General Not-for-Profit Corporation. Again, we haven't seen this for a while. We've been referring to them as nonprofits, but here in Illinois, they refer to them as a not-for-profit. Just a little change in the nomenclature. And just remember that we know that Secretary of States can be sticky when you refer to it differently in the names and not like you just for using the wrong term. So be aware of that. The form that they have can be filled out online and submitted, or the form can be populated and then signed and sent in. From their website, quote, the online Articles of Incorporation cannot include additional provisions concerning such issues as tax exemption. You must file the Articles of Incorporation in paper in order to include other provisions, unquote. Which really means from our perspective that the online is kind of useless. We want to have those protections built into our articles. The state does have a separate PDF guide of instructions and an FAQ for all their services, both the online and how to to fill out the form. So links to both of those instructions and the form itself are in the show notes. The form we are talking about is NFP 102.10. It's a 2-page document and asks for a lot of our basics, your name, your registered agent. But as always, it has some state-specific quirks. Article 3 does ask for the directors and notes that it cannot be less than 3, and that's pursuant to Section 108.10 of the Illinois General Not-for-Profit Corporation Act. It will ask for addresses, but it does not specify that these should be home addresses. They can only be street addresses, no P.O. boxes, so some visibility there. Article 4 is the purpose clause, and this is interesting in that the purpose of the corporation must also be selected among 33 purposes listed in Section 103.05A of the Illinois Code their Corporation Act. This fact specifically states, quote, if needed, you may choose more than one of the allowable purposes, unquote. And a link to this list of purposes is also in the show notes. Again, this is something doesn't seem too dissimilar from like NTE. It's a little more dumbed down. Obviously, there's only 33 choices. But again, be aware of what you're thinking about here when you go into Illinois, that you have to have think about what they specifically want, boxes they want you to check, where they want you to be when you talk about what your purpose is. Article 5 allows for an attachment of additional provisions. As already mentioned, this is where our 501c3 dissolution language would be added. And again, you can't attach it when you do the online. It would only be a paper printout. Then Article 6 is a checkbox section, whether you are a condo association, a co-op housing corp, or an HOA. For foreign registrations, the Illinois also has a form. This one's the NFP 113.15, which is an application for authority to conduct affairs in Illinois, foreign corporations, general not-for-profits. Bulky title for a small document. It's only another 2-page straightforward form. And it asks for the basics of what we've seen with all of our foreign registrations: the name, where you were formed, your address, your home state, and in Illinois. You do need a home state and an Illinois principal office, and, of course, your Illinois registered agent. Section 6 does ask for the names and addresses of the president, secretary, and all directors. Section 7 does ask for the purposes of the registration and does want you to, again, refer to the approved list that we talked about for the regular form, those 33. Unlike your usual good standing ask, here the form specifically asks for, quote, an originally certified copy of the Articles of Incorporation and any amendments or mergers duly authenticated within the last 90 days by the proper officer of the state, unquote, of where you were registered. So rather than a good standing, they want an actual copy of your articles that's, again, certified within 90 days. That's the same thing you see with a good standing. So it's a little different, and sometimes depending on where you are, that could be a longer ask. Like a good standing here in California is instantaneous, but a certified copy may take you several hours to a day to get for those articles if you're registering. So it's good to note that you have a slightly different and perhaps something that'll take you a little bit longer there. Note, too, there's a caveat at the end of the form which states, quote, a corporation that is to function as a club, as defined in Section 1/3.24 of the Liquor Control Act of 1934, must insert in its purpose clause a statement that it will comply with the state and local laws and ordinances relating to alcoholic liquors, unquote. So just in case your nonprofit is partying, setting up a club, be aware that you need to put that in your purpose.
All right, this is great. So that's a good overview. So, Joe, tell us about the cost for filing. Is it expensive in Illinois?
Not at all. The filing fee is $50 for both the articles, if you're domestic, and the application for foreign authority.
So talk about the response time. What's it look like in Illinois?
The current ETA is 10 business days per their FAQ. For an additional $25, there's a 24-hour expedite. And to note that requests for expedited service must be made in person, not by mail in the department's Springfield or Chicago offices. This is where it's good to have, like, again, whoever's going to be your agent in the state, they will have people that will go over and take this over physically anyways. That's how we would generally want a paper filing done. We wouldn't want to mail it because obviously it adds another 3 or 4 days then to the 10 business days once they receive it. So
yeah, so Illinois is a bit behind in the streamlined online approaches to getting these filings done.
They've got that slow Midwest going still.
Yeah, that's right. Take your time. Annual filings. What do we need to do in Illinois to stay current in our corporate status?
So in Illinois, the annual report for not-for-profits, domestic and foreign both, are annually by the end of the month prior to the registration anniversary month. Reports may be filed up to 60 days prior to the start of the anniversary month. So if we form now, here we are in December 2024, our first report would actually be due by November 30th, 2025. It's a reverse of most of the states where you get to the end of the month you've formed in. So think about that. These reports will need to include the name and address of all the officers and directors. Both the domestic and the foreign use the same form, which is what we see here in California as well, and does include a reiteration of the type of business. A copy of this form is going to be in the show links.
So annual fees, do we need to send anything along with that?
It's $10 for both. Note that while the domestic not-for-profit may file online, again, when we're talking about this, the foreign registration may not. And any changes to the report as promulgated by the Secretary of State must be filed separately. You will file an annual report with no changes and then file like an NFP 105.10 to change the registered agent or an NFP 105.20 to change your office and addresses. I can attest to having just done this for an Illinois LP that we have with a client where there were no changes allowed on the form. So we filed the form, then took them send them the same day that we file the report, and then file a change of address thereafter because the general partner of the LP had changed. It's definitely not normal procedure, and it's definitely more bulky. So think about that as you're changing things. That your report will have to reflect what you've already done, and then you change it after, and then the one you get next year will have all the information corrected on it.
So that's interesting. Doing most of our filings in California and Delaware, where the online filings are so streamlined and easy, a lot of clients just do that themselves. It sounds like in Illinois, you're probably going to want to use a service since.
Yeah, that's what I've done. I've worked with the service to get these filed again, because it's the idea of like, they have someone that will physically say, hey, this one goes first, this one goes second. You know, there's always that concern that they'll get filed out of order and then something will get dropped and the state will say, oh, no, you can't do this now. So
that's Illinois is turning out to be a little bit of an interesting state. What about privacy and transparency for these filings in Illinois?
So as we noted, the formation in the annual reports will ask for officer and director information, and they will have to include a street address, although not necessarily the home address. So again, we would use probably our corporate address for all of those, the same as you're using there.
So the state agencies for nonprofits to be aware of if they're operating in Illinois, what do we need to know there?
In Illinois, if the nonprofit is organized there, or it's a foreign that we've registered that solicits, hold assets, or does business there in Illinois, you will be required to file an additional registration with the Attorney General's Consumer Protection section. Here we can note, too, on our Always Checking In, that their website highlights specifically when you open that as January 1st, 2024, they have new dollar amounts for the contribution thresholds that require an audit or a review of financial statement, with the reports due every year to them when you file your 990 with them. So that's something to think about as we talk about that. The numbers there actually lowered. So there's bigger chance or bigger need for you to have an audit or review of your financial statements included when you file with that. And then on the other side, the Illinois Department of Revenue governs all their exemptions, including those regarding charitable gaming taxes and gaming licenses. So links can be found in the show notes to all of the Illinois agencies and to these specific forms.
Okay, so we've got AG registration and tax exemption applications in Illinois, along with the corporate filings. All right, so moving on to Indiana, a place where I spent my college years. So not so fond of Indiana in the wintertime, but gosh, the spring and fall sure are gorgeous. So what do we need to file in Indiana to create our nonprofit corporation there, or to file our foreign nonprofit and qualify to do business?
For sure. So just like Illinois, Indiana has their Secretary of State that governs their formations. As we saw with some of our southern states like Florida earlier this year, they use a version of the BIZ system, the BIZ system for filings and support. In this case, they call it INBIZ.
Oh, that's so cute. INBIZ.
INBIZ. Right. They have a 2-page form 4162 for the domestics, and it's the Articles of Incorporation Domestic Nonprofit Corporation. We're back to calling them nonprofits again. Again, usual suspects, name, address, registered agent. Article 2 is the Statement of Purpose. This is an extremely user-friendly form. In this section, it specifically notes, quote, specific language is required by the IRS in this article in order to be approved for 501c3 status, unquote. They want you to think about this, which is nice. Article 3 is a checkbox to note whether public benefit, religious corporation, or mutual benefit. Article 5 is a checkbox for whether you have members or not. And Article 7 is a distribution of assets on dissolution or final liquidation. Here they have a bumper again reminding you to meet the 501c3 language, and then also to comply with Indiana Code 23-17-22-5 for permitted activities. So in other news, mind your local rules and make sure you get their language as well. An incorporator needs to be named here with their address, but you don't need to name officers or directors in this initial formation.
Interesting. So it sounds like Indiana wants to limit the number of amendment and restatements to articles for nonprofit corporations who don't get it right the first time.
Yes.
That does avoid additional revenue generation for the state, but I'm being a little bit facetious here. So talk a little bit about the foreign nonprofits that are registering to qualify to do business.
For the foreign nonprofit, they have a Form 56369, which is a foreign registration statement that needs to be filed. This is one of those generic to all corporations, nonprofit and professional, LLCs, LPs, and even LLPs. It's a one-page form unless you're a professional corporation, which gives you an additional page. The same basics, name, address, registered agent, home state. Article 2 has a checkbox for nonprofit, and if you're a nonprofit, then you need to. And then if you mark nonprofit, you need to mark whether you will have members and what type they are. It's the same as the domestic form in that sense. It mirrors that. Indiana does prefer that INBIZ be used for all filings rather than paper filings. And unlike a lot of the forms reviewed, like our neighbor here, Illinois, there's a space within it for all the 501c3 language. That being said, PDFs of the form are available online. The index for all their documents is in the show notes.
Great. All right. So Indiana seems very user-friendly. I like this. How about their timing? So am I going to get disappointed now? What does it look like?
Not really. So the Indiana Secretary of State doesn't list their filing times in any of their facts, but a review of services that we use notes that general filings with InBiz are next business day and paper filings take 2 to 3 weeks. And unlike Illinois, there is no expedite available at this time. So this one actually is one where it may behoove you to actually do it online because, one, it's easier, and two, you'll get a quicker return.
Much quicker. Yeah.
Yes.
Sounds like it. And how expensive is it?
For the domestic, it's $50, and for the foreign, it's $75. So again, we're talking a reasonable cost to register here.
Right. And you're not going to get dinged for expedite fees, and you can fairly quickly and cheaply get yourself incorporated or registered. So talk about the annual filings. What do we need to remember to do each year to keep our corporate status in compliance?
For domestic and foreign nonprofits both, there's a business entity report. It's actually due biannually in the anniversary month of the formation registration. So again, if we form here in December 2024, our first reports will be due by December 31st, 2026. It's a 2-page form and does need at least one governing person on record, which for corporation specifically, it means president or secretary as you look at the form.
And the costs?
The fee is $20. It's irrespective of whether you're foreign or domestic. It's the same.
Do we have any privacy concerns for filing in Indiana?
Not really. Indiana's pretty opaque. One officer only needs to be named in the biannual business entity report, and you can, but there's no obligation to name more than that one. So if you're looking for privacy, again, we talked about that real quickly. It's the president or the secretary. You don't have to name directors, and you don't have to name anyone other than one of those two.
And no address.
And no.
Good. Okay. So that's easy. What about the other state agencies? Who else do we report to in Indiana?
So unlike most of the states, in Indiana, even if the nonprofit is organized there or is soliciting, there's no additional registration with the Attorney General's nonprofit and charitable giving section. That being said, some Indiana counties and municipalities may require charities that solicit in person there to register prior to fundraising. As always, it's advisable to consult an attorney there in the local cities if you're going to be there in person. And the Indiana Department of Revenue governs all their tax exemptions. They have a great fact, which notes all the nonprofit exemptions available all in one place. And then from that, where you can link to all the forms that you need to fill out. Again, Indiana's really was one of the most user-friendly for nonprofit states we've seen in a long time, of having everything available for you to do online and to do quickly, and then having it all together in one place that made it easy for you. So, and again, that link to the Department of Revenue fact and all the relevant documents and departments are found down in the show notes.
Well, thanks, Joe. That's really nice to know. Indiana does seem very user-friendly. So I think with that, we're going to wrap up this episode and this year. This is our last episode for 2024. We'll take a break over the holidays, and we'll be back with new episodes in January. And hopefully we'll finish our states in 2025. So thank you, Joe. I really appreciate your help in this episode and all year long. It's been a great year for our Quick Tip episodes.
Oh, it sure has. I'm glad I've been able to do it.
So be sure to check out the show notes, as we mentioned, for links to the resources in Illinois and Indiana, and links to earlier episodes if other states you're interested in have already been covered. Also, as a reminder, if you go back to earlier episodes for states covered earlier this year or in 2023, be sure to check into updated laws before beginning your filing process or doing your annual report to make sure that you've got the updated information. As I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, Farella, Braun, and Martel has a YouTube channel, and there are several nonprofit playlists, including this one that we're building, where all the state filing episodes are in one place, so you can quickly look through that to find the episodes that are of interest to your nonprofit. So with that, I'm Cynthia Rowland, and you've been listening to EO Radio Show, your nonprofit legal resource, brought to you by the Exempt Organizations Group at Farella, Braun, and Martel. If you have suggestions for topics you would like for us to discuss, please email us at eoradioshow@fbm.com. That's eoradioshow@fbm.com. Thank you for joining us. Until next time, make a difference.